We're finishing up a series this morning where we're talking about the pursuit of happiness in the book of Ecclesiastes. It uses the word happy 5 times, and we've been looking at the place where it describes happiness, and Solomon is the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes. He ruled Israel when Israel was at its zenith in terms of prosperity and power. He personally had everything he needed to pursue hard after happiness. He assumed that wisdom would ensure that his pursuit would be successful. He thought that a lack of wisdom is what got in the way of happiness. And what he ended up finding out is that he assumed wrongly relative to wisdom and happiness. Look what he says in Ecclesiastes 1. It's written in your worship folder. He begins his journal by saying, I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. Goes on to say, I devoted myself to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under heaven. What a heavy burden God has laid on men. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, chasing after the wind. But with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Solomon cannot avert his eyes from what is real and evident as he looks around from his vantage point relative to being a person who amassed a large wealth of wisdom. Here's what he said. With much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. He found that as he looked at things and understood, the more he tried to understand things, the more ponderous the knowledge became. The more wisdom he amassed, the more difficult it became to push down some of the questions that surfaced when he looked around and wondered, why do things happen like this? If God is in heaven, why does he allow this type of thing to happen? He ends up saying, everything's meaningless. Meaningless. The chasing after wind. The word meaningless translates a word which includes ideas of brevity, unreliability, frailty, futility. Amounts to zero. From his vantage point, life is without meaning and purpose. And as he closes his letter, it's with a degree of cynicism. And you'll hear it in his voice as he writes to youth. Enjoy yourself while you can. Look what he says. Ecclesiastes 11. Be happy, young man, while you are young. Let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart, whatever your eyes see. But know that for all these things God will bring you to judgment. So then, banish anxiety from your heart. Cast off the troubles of your body, for youth and vigor are meaningless. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach, when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. The message of Ecclesiastes seems to be, enjoy it while you can, before you run headfirst into the meaninglessness of life. I think that Solomon could have learned some things from his father. Well, Solomon's father was David. And David wasn't the scholar Solomon was. But he had a wisdom, and he found something in life that eluded Solomon. Look what it says in Psalm 131, verses 1 through 3. David writes, My heart is not proud, O Lord. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. But I have stilled and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. He says, O Lord, my eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. He's saying, I do not focus my attention on things too lofty. It's not that David didn't ask, but he was not tormented by the need to know, as Solomon was. Solomon had a need to know. a restless searching. David said, I don't concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful or too lofty. It's not that he didn't want to know the answers. It's that he didn't have to know the answers. There's a difference, isn't there, between wanting to know and having to know. There's a difference. And that's what's the difference between Solomon, who had to know, and David, who just wanted to know. Why? Why was that difference there? What did David have that Solomon didn't have? And the answer is, David had a still and quiet heart. What it says, David says, I have stilled and quieted my soul. Stilled literally means what is appropriate to a person, what isn't beyond a pay grade. There's some things that we're not going to know. And Solomon had to try to figure that out, things that were beyond his pay grade, things that he didn't have the ability to be able to comprehend. David was fine with that. I can understand the things I'm supposed to understand. The things that are not appropriate for a man like me to understand, I'm fine with that. I can let that go. I don't have to know. I'd like to know. That's what differentiated Solomon from David. It says he quieted his heart. In the Bible, the heart is not just emotions. It's not just that David was able to say, shh, don't be afraid, or don't be anxious. Heart for a Jew was intellect, emotion, and will. So what David was saying, not only that I have a quiet heart, but that I have a quiet head and heart. That's a challenging thing, isn't it? Not only to have a quiet heart, but a quiet head. How tormented do we become by unanswerable questions? Why did that happen? Why does this happen? Why did you do that? Why didn't you do this? We don't like these questions. In fact, we'd like to banish them from our mind. Solomon couldn't. He had to know. He couldn't not ask. His head was loud. His head was loud. We understand what that's like, don't we? A loud head? Plagued by questions that we can't brush aside. We like to say it doesn't matter, but then there they are again. How was David able to pull that off? How could he do that? How could he have a quiet head and a quiet heart? He gives us an indication. He says, like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. You know what a weaned child is? A child no longer reliant on breast milk or milk from the mother. It still has a close relationship with the mother. It still needs to be provided directly by the mother, but not in the way that an infant was. That's what David looked at his soul, his life, and that's the image that he had. Him and God, a weaned child with its mother. What does that mean? What is he saying? Okay, do this with me. Think about an infant, okay? Think about an infant. Okay? An infant. Infant wakes up hungry. You know what hunger is? It's a God-given alarm system, alerting the infant to the presence of an unmet need. And when an infant feels that alarm, the infant makes the need known. Those of you who are mothers understand that, don't you? The infant makes the need known. And by crying or different ways, if the cry is met with a timely response, what happens? The hunger stops and the crying stops and the need is met. I see an infant right there. Let me tell you what's going to happen. That infant that I'm looking at, she's going to make her needs known through crying, by looking. I want to be picked up. I want to be held. I want to be fed. I want to be changed. Every time that infant makes a bid, Mommy, pick me up. Mommy, feed me. Mommy, change me. Now, she doesn't say it with words. Every time she does that and there's a response, a brick is laid in a foundation. Every time, brick, 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 brick. foundation, solid. When she gets 2 or 3, she will have developed a mental representation of her mother as responsive. By and large, I can trust my mother to respond to me, a mental representation of the mother as responsive. This mental representation will be the foundation of her personality. It will provide security. That security will be the basis of that child's ability to have self-worth, self-control, mastery, and empathy. Those things are associated with security. I can trust my mother. Therefore, I don't need to have what I want right now. My mother will provide it. She always has. Self-esteem. That child's world is reflected in the face of the mother. And that child cries, and the world comes to her. That child believes, I must be pretty important. I can make the world come to me. And the world feeds me, and the world changes me. The world comforts me. Mastery. A child will be able to, even now, she's playing with a worship folder, kind of looking at it and looking at the chair. And the reason why she can explore her world, because her mother is there. If her mom leaves, that child will not be able to explore anymore, because she will be frightened. But while her mother is there, the reason we can know she is secure is that she's exploring everything. Mastery. She's looking around. She's taking things in. That's the way it works. Mastery, empathy. She experiences relationships as good. Therefore, she'll see hurt and she'll want to reach out. All those things, self-esteem, self-control, mastery, and empathy, are built upon the foundation of security. Why am I saying this? David's soul relates to God the way a weaned child relates to a responsive mother. He'll be there. He'll provide for me. He'll protect me. I don't need to have anything right now. That's the way David quiets and stills his heart. He's established a mental representation of God as responsive. And some of the images David has in mind when he thinks about God, he shares in Psalm 23, a psalm that many of us know, love. Let me read it. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemy. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. There's one picture in this psalm that we see very clearly. Actually, there are 3 pictures in this psalm, not just one. 3 relational pictures. Sheep and a shepherd, a traveler and his companion, a guest and the host. And in here, David is saying, when and because I am a sheep and God is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. Because I am a traveler and God is my companion, I will fear no evil. Because I am a guest and he is my host, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. 3 different pictures. Let's look at them briefly. He says, relative to sheep and shepherd, I shall not be in want. As shepherd, God leads into green pastures and quiet waters, into restful places. He provides opportunities for respite. This becomes a means of restoration. Journeying is difficult, And as shepherd, God knows the place that we need to pull aside and be restored. And he provides those kind of experiences to restore our soul. God chooses paths of righteousness for us, paths that are right with him, that make sense to him. He acts for his name's sake. And that means in accordance with his values and his revealed character. And when David knows, because he knows that God is his shepherd, that he will not be in want. He will lack nothing. Because a shepherd, their function is to anticipate and meet the needs of the sheep. That's what a shepherd does. David understands that. He used to be a shepherd. So, as sheep with a shepherd, David understands, I'm not going to be in want. You're going to provide restorative experiences for me. As a traveler, with and alongside whom God is companion, he says, I will fear no evil. In contrast with the joyous experiences of the sheep, traveling is a little more hazardous. There are dangerous paths. When it says, through the valley of the shadow of death literally means deepest darkness. Literally what it is. The valley of deepest darkness, where you can't see what's in front of you. You don't know if you're going to be attacked. You don't know if you're going to arrive. You don't know. You can't see. And what David says, even in the midst of a valley where that's the issue, a dark place, I will fear no evil because God accompanies him. In dark times, the relationship becomes more personal, more intimate. If you notice, the pronoun shifts. Because the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down. Third person. It speaks of God as the guide. He does this. But when it's talking about darkness, it goes from he to you. You are with me. They comfort me. And so it goes from he and us to you and I. And I think the point could be, in dark times, the relationship becomes more personal, more intimate. God leads in the first 3 verses, but then in dark times, it's not he leads, but where does he walk? He walks with me. And the thing that I won't resent, we've seen it all, footprints. Footprints. He leads during sometimes, but during the difficult time. It goes from leads to walks with to carry. That's the image. It seems to suggest the darker the shadow, the closer the Lord. That's as a traveler with a companion. As a guest with a host, he says, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. There's a couple different kinds of difficulties we face. Some are circumstantial. And that's the kind of deep darkness we found that you need a traveling companion. But there are other kinds that are more personal, enemies. Not just hostile circumstances, but hostile people, from which you need protection. And in that, God provides for that as well. This psalm and this part of it affirms care in every emergency. He anoints my head, speaks of welcome after a journey, washing and cooling off. The overflowing cup of his provision. By this goodness and love, he will be as assured that goodness will follow him all the days of his life. And beyond that, he says, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Literally, I will return to the house. There are some questions here. There are questions that sheep and travelers and guests naturally voice. Will I run out of what I need? Now, if sheep could talk, it might say that. Sheep aren't able to provide for their own needs, but they need a shepherd. A sheep might ask, will I provide? Will I run out of what I need? A traveler, will I arrive safely? I'm going through dark places. I'm going to go into places that I'm not going to be able to see around me. I wonder if I'll arrive. I bet you've thought that. Are you on a good road or a bad road? You ever wonder that? You look around. You look in your checkbook. Am I on a good road or a bad road? It doesn't look good. Will I arrive safely? We ask questions like that. We wonder, will I be forced to leave? I wonder if I'll have a permanent place with him. You've asked that question, haven't you? Where are you going to be? What's going to happen when you arrive? These questions naturally occur to us. We want to try to find answers. Will I run out of stuff? Will I arrive safely? Will there be a place for me? You know what the deal is? We can be consumed with these questions, and David asked them. You know what he did, though? He looked past the question to his shepherd, and to his companion, and to his host. And this is what he ended up saying. I'm asking these questions, but the Lord is my shepherd. I'm not going to want anything. The Lord is my companion. I'm going to arrive safely. The Lord is my host. I'm going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That's how David stilled his heart. See, David didn't just listen to his heart. Listen to me. This is a tough thing. He spoke to his heart. He spoke to his heart. We're good at listening to our heart. What's going to happen? What will happen? What will she do? Will you arrive? Are you going to be okay? Are you sure you'll be provided for? We don't bid these questions. They rise unannounced in the middle of the night. They keep us awake. They keep us from falling asleep. We bite our fingernails. We check our checkbooks. These questions come unbidden. We talk comes to us, and the difficult thing is talking back. That's what I think David did and how he stilled his heart. You're asking these questions, but the Lord is my shepherd. What am I going to run out of? The Lord is my companion. How will I not be protected? The Lord is my host. I'm going to dwell in this house forever. He saw past his circumstances and his enemies. Now, those are real. Those are real. You know what David was really good at? Let this represent dark circumstances and dark enemies. It's only a penny. A penny can't protect you from much. Now I'm looking at this penny, and you're blurry. This is the way we live our lives most often. Looking at the stuff right in front of us, but not being able to see past these things. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to focus on you now. And now this penny looks blurry. Do you know what David did? He saw the things in his life, the circumstances and the enemies. But you know what he was able to do? To focus past that on his shepherd, his companion, his host. He was able to leverage that perception gradually. Not, this isn't all or nothing. David went through a lot of stuff learning this. Well, that child, that infant there, is not going to learn to trust in a day. It's the ongoing experience, day after change, after bottle, after pickup, after conversation, 1 year, 2 years, gets into 2 and 3, a mental representation. It takes God 6 months to make a squash and 100 years to be an oak tree. Which one do you want to be? A squash for God or an oak tree for God? If you're going to be an oak tree, it's going to take time. And you're going to walk through dark valleys. And you're going to look at blank checkbooks. And you're going to deal with questions about, I wonder if I'm going to be able to have a place. And then, as he cares for you, it becomes more and more possible to quiet our hearts, little by little by little. That's how David stilled his heart. He thought about God's commitments to him as a shepherd. Do you know what commitments God makes to you? as your shepherd? Have you ever thought about that? Ever thought about that? Not how well you keep his commandments, but about his commitments as your shepherd. What does it mean that he says to you, I will shepherd you? His commitment to you to be your companion, to walk through difficult places. What commitment does he make to you as your companion? How about as your host? See, to look past these things to the commitments that he makes, that's how David was able to still his heart. I think there's a lesson here. Remember the Garden of Eden? Where the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom. Why did she need wisdom? Why did she need wisdom? You remember what the serpent had said? Did God say you'll die? You won't surely die. God doesn't want you to be like him, knowing good and evil. That's why he's putting up these false rules. Do you know what Satan is doing? Do you know what the serpent is doing in that context? He's saying you can't trust God to be your shepherd or your companion or your host. Now, if you can't trust God to be your shepherd, and if you can't trust him to be your companion, and if you can't trust him to be your host, then you know what that means? You're on your own. You're traveling alone, and you have no place to go to when you arrive. And you know what you're going to have to do in order to do the best you can? You're going to have to get as much wisdom because you're going to need to use it to protect yourself. I wonder if that's what Solomon is dealing with. I need wisdom because I need it to protect myself. Maybe Solomon could have learned something from David. The Lord is my shepherd. I will lack for nothing. The Lord is my companion. I will arrive safely. The Lord is my host. I will dwell in his house forever. And had he seen that more clearly, you know what it would have done? He would still have wanted to know, but he would not have needed to know. It would not have been driven to know in order to protect himself. Because we have a hard time trusting God. We do. You know how we do it? Well, what did Adam and Eve do? When they put it upon themselves to know good and evil, to protect themselves. How do we know if we're using our awareness of good and evil to protect ourselves? Well, what happened to them? When God showed up, what did they do? Hid. You know what we do? We hide things. There's needs, and we hide them from God, and hide them from others, hide them from ourselves. We can't even admit to ourselves the fears that lie within. We hide. Or what happened when God showed up and said, what did you do? And what did Adam do? Do you remember? Adam, what did you do? It was her fault. Yeah, the woman you gave me. Yeah, it wasn't my idea. The woman you gave me. She gave me fruit from the tree and I ate it. So that's another thing that we do. We hurl. Rather than express our needs to God, you know what we do? When we need to protect ourselves, we hide what we need. Or we hurl our needs at others. I'm angry and it's your fault. I'm fearful and it's your fault. And we hide and we hurl, either one of the two. How do we still our heart? You know the answer now, don't you? What do you think about to still your heart? What do you think about? Well, think about him. Make room for him, his commitments. What does it mean that he's your shepherd? What does it mean that he's your companion? What does it mean that he's your host? Think about that. And then, okay, well, let's try it. Think about your checkbook, your balance. Think about your retirement account. Think of the relationships that are dissipating. the health problems that are mounting. Think about, thought about enough. Let me tell you how not to still your heart. I've got to do better. How not to still your heart is gaze at yourself. Gaze at your questions. Gaze at your doubts. Gaze at your fears. That's not going to make them go anywhere. Are you thinking about your checkbook? Can you think about that for a minute? And think about, I want you to worry about it. Really do. I want you to worry about it. Worry about your relationships. They might go somewhere. Think bad things could happen. They really could. And are you worrying a little bit? I don't see anybody biting their nails. Any of you bite your nails? They bite. Why? You thinking about that? I'm going to tell you a few things. The Lord is your shepherd, and you're not going to lack anything. The Lord is your companion. Even in deepest darkness, He's going to walk with you. And you're going to get to point C because He's going to get you there. You don't hold His hand, He holds your hand, and He never lets go. The Lord's your host. At the end of the road, He's going to open the door. What happened to those worries? They didn't go away. See, you know the reason why you think of these things? It doesn't eliminate tension, but would you agree with me? It does turn it down, doesn't it? Did you feel it? Did you feel a little bit of stillness starting to, did you feel it? A little bit of stillness starting to settle. That's the way we still our heart, to think about Him and His commitments. When you still your heart, that's the beginning of it. Then you share your heart. Look what David says. Find rest, O my soul, in God alone. My hope comes from Him. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. You understand why David was who he was? David really thought a lot about God. Not His commandments, His commitments. That's where his mind went. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in Him at all times. O people, pour out your hearts to Him, for God is our refuge. Low-born men are but a breath, the high-born are but a lie. If weighed on a balance, they are nothing. Together they are only a breath. Do not trust in extortion or take pride in stolen goods. Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them. There's some stuff Solomon could have benefited from here, isn't there? One thing God has spoken. Two things have I heard. That you, O God, are strong, and that you, O God, are loving. You know, it's a little thing you could remember. You learned it when you were a kid, when you prayed over the meal. God is, let us thank Him for our food. Amen. God is great. You, O Lord, are strong. God is good. You alone are loving. David says He is a mighty rock. He's our refuge. How do we treat God when He's our refuge? How do we treat Him? Here's what David said. Trust in Him at all times, O people. Pour out your hearts to Him, for God is a refuge. You know what you do when God is a refuge? You pour out your heart to Him. Pour out your heart means let Him know the things that are in your mind. Pour out your heart. See, when God is plan A, B, and C, you're going to pour out your heart to Him. If God is plan B, then you're not. Because okay, if this doesn't come or if that doesn't come, then I might talk to God about it, but I really don't need to talk to Him. I got a lot of irons in the fire. And again, yeah, fine. But what I want to make the point is that when you trust God, you present your needs to Him. You don't muzzle yourself. I should trust Him. That means I shouldn't talk to Him. Because if I believe that He's going to do it, then I need to believe enough not to even ask him for it. Okay. You might make a point, but that's not the way David functioned. See, with God, it's a relationship. And if you're not talking to God, it's not a relationship. It's self-control. It's us taking these thoughts and putting them in our head and trying to use these thoughts to push our anxieties down. David didn't push his anxieties down. He thought about God and lifted his requests up to God. He poured out his heart to God. Look at the Psalms. David is very verbal with God because he saw God as, get this, real. As his shepherd, his companion, and his host. He was honest with him. David was brutally honest with him. In sharing our heart with God, a couple things, and we're going to wrap up and do communion. Don't muzzle your heart. Don't muzzle your heart. See, some of us have been taught that the only prayers we can pray to God are form prayers. I was raised that way. Didn't really develop an ability to just talk with him. And it was hard for me to learn to be honest with him. I still had trouble with it. God already knows what's on your heart. It makes sense that you would tell him. Speak freely with him. When it says, come to the throne of grace with confidence, what confidence means is speak freely. God wants you to speak freely with him. That means you probably say pattern prayers, form prayers. They're really good, but be honest with him. God, I'm frightened. Some of us have a hard time because our minds go very quickly. I developed a habit that some of you might like, others of you won't, because some of us are very verbal, some of us are in our heads. I journal and I write things down. Sometimes the only way I can focus my thoughts. But I find as I write, or some of us as we just speak with him, think about him. Somebody the other day talked about when they talk with God, they put a chair in front. They put a chair in front and talk to it. As if something, now some of you are saying, oh, baloney, but others of you saying, I know exactly what that's like. See, we don't all relate to God the same way. Some of us can talk in our heads, some of us write, some of us say out loud. The important thing is, pour out your heart to him, however it works for you. Don't muzzle your heart thinking, well, I should trust, and no, you say it to him. Okay? That makes sense? Trust doesn't mean you bite your lip. Bite means that you open your mouth to him. And secondly, the reason you pour out your heart is not to eliminate temptation. Again, I'll use this. I'm always whacking this thing. So if this is prayer, so what we think is, okay, I'm anxious. I'm thinking about my checkbook. Okay, so I'm going to pray to God. I'm going to think about him. Okay, God, you're this, you're that, you're that. I feel a little bit better, but I still have a little bit of tension. What's wrong with this thing? You know, there's got to be something wrong with my prayers because my prayers are working. I should be easy, right? So you don't speak to God in order to eliminate tension. You're not going to eliminate tension. What you can do is dial it down just a little bit so that you can endure tension today. And guess what you'll have to think about tomorrow? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. The Lord is my companion. I will arrive safely. I will fear no evil. The Lord is my host. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You know what that will do when you think about that tomorrow? It will do the same thing it does today. It will turn the tension down and allow you to talk with him. And that's what I would recommend. Think about that, about who he is. Do that first. Don't just worry out loud. Boy, I wonder what will happen about this. I wonder what, boy, geez, I really wonder. God, I'm going to talk to you, God, now, okay? I wonder what I'm going to do about this. You know, so there's no difference. It's like worrying out loud. Look at who you're talking to. Think about him. Think about his commitments. He's your shepherd. He's your companion. He's your host. Just think about it a little bit. Now talk to him. God, I'm glad you're my shepherd. Would you help guide me? I don't know where to go. God, thanks, you're my companion. I'm walking through dark days here, and I don't know where to turn. God, I'm afraid that I'm not going to end up in a good place. Thanks that you're my host. Talk to him. Open your heart to him. I want to quote, we're not going to understand everything. I like this. Read that. Charles Spurgeon, I think it was 17th or 18th century, 19th century, I forget when he existed. God is too good to be unkind, too wise to be mistaken. And when I cannot trace his hand, I can always trust his heart. This is what David understood. Solomon tried to trace his hand and couldn't. And he could trust and not trust. David couldn't trace his hand, but he didn't need to because he understood that he is, you understand now, I've said it a number of times, his hand, shepherd's hand, his hand, companion's hand, his hand, host's hand. David could trust it. When experienced communion, I used to say, how can I know this? He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up for you, how will he not also, along with Jesus, be your shepherd, be your companion, be your host? If he wasn't willing to do those things, he never would have sent his son. This is what I want you to do then with communion. As you take the bread and drink the juice, I want you to think about what this represents. His commitment to you to be your shepherd. Say, thank you that you're my shepherd, and I shall not want. His commitment to be your companion. Thank you that you walk with me, even through the deepest darkness, and I will fear no evil. Thank you that you are my host, and I will dwell in your house forever. So we're going to play some music. Grab the elements, take them back to your seat. I won't tell you when to partake of them. Drink the juice, eat the bread, think of Christ on the cross, opening the doors for you to have this relationship so that you could still your heart and pour it out to him. Remind you of the sign-up sheet on the way out. If you could plug in with kids once, a couple times this summer, would be great. Let me pray for us. Father, thanks for the chance to be able to think about you. Go out into busy times now. Life is busy. Places to go, things to do. It's appropriate. Would you help us make more room gradually, progressively, slowly for you in our thoughts? Not that it causes us to muzzle things, but so that it opens our hearts to you. But opens our hearts to you in a context of trust. It's not overnight. It's not something that you demand. It's something that comes over time. Pray that our hearts would become like a weaned child with a mother. Enough of an experience of responsiveness to comfort the child, to lead the child to expect responsiveness, not demand it, but expect it. Allows for security, comfort, closeness. Pray that those things would gradually characterize our relationship with you. We have a long way to go. None of us are so familiar with your commandments that your commitments, thinking about them, feel strange to us. They weren't strange to David. Apparently they're important. Would you help us? In Jesus' name, amen.